Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, Isis, Imitation of Life. The Goddess Next Door helps a young black girl overcome racism during the era of Jim Crow in this Golden Age Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Imitation of Life in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. One of my viewers wanted me to take a look at the Lawmen Reeves miniseries that is currently streaming on Paramount Plus and is currently on Sundays on CBS television stations. And the viewer wanted to get my opinion of the Lawmen Reeves miniseries after watching my video where I reviewed Kevin Grevious's Reeves comic book series and wanted to see if this series followed the law for quality entertainment that presented black people in a positive image. Well, I have to say that Kevin Grevio's Reeves is a far superior series to what is presented in this Reeves miniseries, and Kevin Grevio's Reeves really captures the heart and spirit of the legendary lawman far better than what Paramount executives did in this mid-adaptation, which basically is passive-aggressive in that it is passively about Reeves, but aggressively continues to promote the same tropes that we see in many of the slave movies produced by white supremacist media platforms like Paramount. Now, in the first episode of Lawmen Reeves, it basically reminded me so much of that Cynthia Erivo Harriet movie that I was shaking my head as I was watching this opening of this miniseries. Now, this miniseries wants to allegedly show us a more comprehensive picture of Reeves, but I believe that was passively done so that they could aggressively continue to present their same old slave tropes that they present in most of their slave movies. Because that's what Lawmen Reeves feels like to me. It doesn't feel like a story telling the tale of the legendary lawman. No, what it feels more like is a glorified slave movie where they put a historical figure in the film so that they could go out here and be able to continue getting into their old slave tropes. And this is possibly why they cast a foreign black actor in David Olewo to become Reeves, the legendary lawman, because they know a foundational black American would protest what was presented in the screenplay, because what's presented in the inciting incident of this miniseries is Reeves basically being a slave in the Confederate Army, and as he's a slave in the Confederate Army, he's following behind a slave master who is a lieutenant in the military, and the way Reeves is presented in the beginning is showing him as a little bit cowardly because he's basically pondering as the battle is about to start, thinking about leaving until he's given his master's shotgun, and after being given his master's shotgun, he's leading the charge, and Reeves follows behind him. And again, this is more passive-aggressive attempts to downplay one of our icons by going out here and showing him, one, as a Confederate soldier, and two, basically showing him as being weak and following behind the white man. All efforts to try to downplay Reeves' legendary status as a U.S. Marshal, and goes out and again presents him as weak in comparison to the white man. And as they present him as weak in comparison to the white man in the opening scenes, he's shown in battle doing a lot of the work in battle for his master. And then after this battle, it transitions to Reeves in a standard scene for most of your slave movies. What they do is feature Reeves and his master sitting there talking after he goes out here to go meet his woman. What happens is that Reeves then goes out and is playing cards with his slave master, and his slave master offers to play him for his freedom. But what happens is the master cheats at the game, and as he cheats at the game, Reeves goes into super brute mode, beats his master down, then decides to flee to this Indian land. And as he's in Indian land, the war ends, and he's with this Native American family with a woman who's a widow. And that's where we start to get more white supremacist tropes in the story. Because as Bass Reeves is free out here, he then runs into one of the people who were a part of that Confederate army. And as he runs into that individual, they wind up murdering the boy who he was being a stepfather to. And I started to see more of the tropes that are a major part of these kinds of movies. And again, these kind of movies, what they do is they'll passively show you a black hero, but aggressively what they will do is try to weave their white supremacist narratives into the story. And they need to see these white supremacist narratives in order for their world to be smooth regarding the presentation of our black heroes. And that was my big problem with Bass Reeves, is that it's a middling mid-series. It's a mid-series, and it's a mid-series because the people who were adapting this material have no real heart for the material, and they have no real heart for the material because the material means nothing to them. Because David Oyelowo, again, he's a black man from a foreign country, so the story of Bass Reeves doesn't mean anything to him the way it did for Kevin Grevioux. I mean, when I look at Kevin Grevioux' Bass Reeves, I can see that love and that heart for the material and the story of Bass Reeves in the pages of his comic, and I can see that love and that passion for Bass Reeves' story in an effort to try to tell his story and try to show a story that is inspiring and uplifting regarding the life of one of our icons who wound up being whitewashed by the mainstream media and turned into the Lone Ranger. Now, the Lone Ranger story, which was a legendary story, was one of the great travesties of history, and while I always loved Clayton Moore's performance as the Lone Ranger, I'm deeply saddened that the entire story of the Lone Ranger, a part of American history, was completely whitewashed because the story of the Lone Ranger was one of the biggest parts of black history, and it should have been on stage for all to see. Unfortunately, the white supremacists at the time, what they did was take away the story of one of our heroes. And what's really sad here is that the story of one of our heroes is still not being told by Paramount Plus and CBS. No, what we get here with this Bass Reeves miniseries is just Harriet 3.0, and Harriet, which was a just travesty of cinema, bastardized the story of Harriet Tubman, and Cynthia Erivo's performance in that horror of a movie just made me shake my head the same way I was shaking my head regarding David Oyelowo's presentation of Bass Reeves. But this is par for the course for white supremacist Hollywood in its adaptation of the stories of our black heroes and our black icons, because the white supremacists in mainstream media don't want to elevate a black person to the same level of being a legend that white people are, and they don't want to see a black hero presented in a balanced, humanized way. So what they'll do again is passively make an adaptation, but aggressively go out here and push their stereotypes. Moreover, what they will do is put no heart and soul into the story because they don't want black men and black women to be inspired and uplifted by the story of our heroes and our icons. And this is why we cannot trust anybody outside of foundational black Americans to be the ones to tell the stories of our heroes and our icons. No, we are the only ones who can go out here and tell those stories because we're the ones who are going to have the passion and heart, and we're going to have that passion and heart to make sure that when our stories are told, they are told in a balanced and humanized way, something we didn't get with this Bass Reeves adaptation, which is saying lawmen. No, if the Bass Reeves was the Lone Ranger, he is the law man, and that's the story that should have been told, but we didn't get that story in this Bass Reeves adaptation, and I would only wish that Kevin Greville would have been given the green light for a project about Bass Reeves, because I believe Kevin Greville would have done the legendary lawman justice in an adaptation of the story of Bass Reeves. Because what I read in Kevin Greville's Bass Reeves comic really showed how much love he had for the legendary lawman, and the way he presented the story was far more balanced than what David Alawo presented in his adaptation of Bass Reeves, and I feel like it's a major injustice done to the legendary lawman of Bass Reeves on screen with this adaptation by David Alawo, and this again shows me why foreign-born blacks should not be out here presenting themselves or portraying legendary foundational black American heroes. No, legendary foundational black American heroes need to be presented by foundational black Americans, because this is our history, and our history needs to be presented by us. And that is the greatest injustice of this Lawmen Bass Reeves miniseries. I mean, it's bad enough that the Bass Reeves character had his story whitewashed in the 21st century, and this foreign-born black in the 21st century is out here looking to go out here and make one of our heroes and our icons into not just another generic slave movie with mid-level presentation. No, I really am disappointed by this Bass Reeves miniseries, because again, it just doesn't follow the law of quality entertainment and just doesn't do Bass Reeves the justice he deserves and shows him as the hero that he actually is. No, I can't recommend you go out here and see Lawmen Bass Reeves, because there were no black men involved behind the camera, and because there were no black men behind the camera, we don't get a positive image of black manhood or black masculinity that does justice to one of our great black male heroes. No, this whole Lawmen Bass Reeves miniseries does no justice to Bass Reeves, and it's one that I could easily see myself passing as related to this series, and I wouldn't have watched it at all unless the viewer had asked me, because after hearing what Professor Black Truth has talked about regarding this series, I see everything that he said regarding this series to be true. Moreover, I just see it as Harriet 3.0, because, I mean, this is just Harriet all over again, and it's just what Hollywood does when it comes down to our heroes and our icons. What they do is don't do them justice in their adaptations, and they go out of their way to make our heroes and our icons look like jokes. So I don't really want to recommend this series, and it's again it's just so mid and so lame. It's just not worth your time, and it saddens me, because again, there are talented people like Kevin Greville out there who should have gotten this project and would have done a far better job of it, and would have shown a love and a passion for Bass Reeves, because everything that is in his comic should have been presented on screen, but sadly we don't get that type of presentation, and I believe that black folks, we deserve better than this, and this Bass Reeves is one Lone Ranger you just need to leave alone altogether. Now, you can possibly find Kevin Greville's Bass Reeves comics on Walmart.com, or you can find them at other online booksellers, and they are far superior to what is presented in this streaming service shite, and I urge you to go out here and get them. And as you're out there getting them, you guys can go out here and pick up some of the great positive black fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, my vampire novel Eternal Night, my black sorority novel The Thetas, or my black business novel Recipe for Success, And you can also pick up some of my comics like John Haynes at Death's Door, which is available on Lulu.com, and Esteem, No Good Deed, which is available on Kindle for 99 cents, or in paperback in Esteem Blast from the Past. And if you want to see me make more videos taking television and movies to the barbecue, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Give in to temptation and pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess featuring a bonus pin-up and the other 2 books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online bookstores everywhere today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.